שלום רב לכולם. תחושה קצת מוזרה לדבר למחשב ולדעת ש-192 אנשים כרגע מקשיבים. בגלל שיש לנו משתתפים רבים שנרשמו מחו"ל, אני אעבור בהתחלה לאנגלית, ובסוף אנחנו נעבור שוב לעברית. אז בוקר טוב. Hello and good morning. I would like to thank you all for registering and participating in this first international webinar of our society, which is the Israeli Society of Ultrasound in Obstetrics and Gynecology. It is an honor to have so many guests from Israel and so many from abroad. Difficult and uncertain times can create interesting opportunities. And today, we have such a huge opportunity, which is to welcome 4 pillars in our field to give excellent presentations on fetal CNS, fetal heart, and ultrasound in gynecology. As being world leaders in the field, I'm sure that we will all learn how to improve our diagnosis, how to sharpen our consultations, and also how to interact better with our colleagues from other fields. Some personal words. I've yet never moderated such a large-scale webinar, so I guess you can all hear from my voice that I'm a bit excited. I hope that all will go on the best side, technically and otherwise. We were hoping to do it live first, and then as a hybrid course or hybrid congress, both live and on the web. But this time, with this COVID closing on us, we are doing it all on the web, all webbing, each from his own home or clinic. So how is it going to be? We'll present each lecturer, and then we will hear about a 30-minute talk from them. You can send, during the talk, questions by pushing the Q&A button in the lower part of your screen. After each lecture, we'll have about 10 minutes for questions and discussions. After the first 2 talks, we will also have a break for coffee, but this time this will be on you. At the end of this webinar, I will switch to Hebrew for some housekeeping notes regarding our society.
Hello everybody. Thank you first to your society to give me the opportunity to lecture about fetal CNS imaging for this first webinar. In this lecture, I will discuss an important issue in routine practice of fetal ultrasound, which is how to elucidate an isolated or undetermined ventriculomegaly when obviously there is no malformation such as posterior fossa anomalies or midline anomalies. So, as you know, ventriculomegaly is defined by an atrial width above a threshold of 10 millimeters, corresponding to about 4 standard deviations above the mean. And atrial width should be measured on the axial plane using strict anatomical criteria, and we'll speak about that. Ventriculomegaly can be divided into mild, moderate, and severe forms, corresponding to measurements between 10 and 12, 13, 15, and above 15 millimeters respectively. Ventriculomegaly is the main findings to diagnose CNS anomalies, such as malformative entities, and there is a broad list of malformative entities, neural tube defect, midline anomalies, CSF obstruction related to malformations like aqueduct stenosis or Walker malformations. There are also migration and cortical disorders, and very rare pathologies like hemimegalencephaly. There is also clastic etiologies, infectious origin or vascular origin. There is also tumor or tumor-like origins, solid or cystic lesions. And also, there is a huge list of syndromes, including adeuploidies. That's why karyotyping is mandatory when facing isolated ventriculomegaly. If all the etiologic workup is negative, you are dealing with isolated or undetermined ventriculomegaly, and by definitions, it's a provisional diagnosis of exclusions. As stated by Melchior in this article about how to counseling in isolated mild ventriculomegaly, states that mild isolated ventriculomegaly represents a major diagnostic issue, as it can be apparently benign findings, but it can also be associated with aneuploidies, congenital infections, cerebral vascular insults, or other cerebral or extracerebral anomalies. To overcome this dilemma, I want to provide you with a set of etiological tools to elucidate some of this isolated ventriculomegaly. But because it's always the problem of this the mild ventriculomegaly, the major problems is to be sure that the ventriculomegaly exists. And this is the most important question when facing a mild isolated ventriculomegaly. Is it a real ventriculomegaly? And that means that you have to perform accurate measurements. As illustrated in this case, a patient for borderline ventriculomegaly. You see, you are between 10.8 and 12 millimeters. But when you do accurate measurements, you are at 9 millimeters, and there is no ventriculomegaly at all. So it's like when you cut zucchini. If you cut orthogonal to the zucchini, you will obtain this slice. But if you cut it off axis, you will get this slice, which is obviously larger than the first one. And therefore, we published in 2009 a score to accurately measure the ventricle. And briefly, there were 4 criteria. On a strict axial plane, first, this is strict axial plane. That means the midline is perpendicular to ultrasound beam and is equidistant from the distal and proximal bones. Second, adequate anatomical level. The measurements should be performed at the level of the CSP and the ambient cisterna here. And accurate location of the atrium, and the atrium, which is here. In fact, the atrium is facing the internal parieto-occipital sulcus, which is here. And these measurements should be accurately performed by accurate caliper placement. That means on to on, orthogonal to the wall of the ventricle with the adequate image size, like that. If you look at this image, it's not orthogonal at all. The measurement is performed on the occipital horn, and this is not accurate for sure. If the ventriculomegaly is confirmed, then our set of etiological diagnostic tools may be helpful. And you should know that several of these tools can be used in combinations. The first one, you should indicate and investigate for an obstructive pattern. What means obstructive pattern? That ventriculomegaly is related to an obstruction. And this pattern includes the following features. First, an increased cephalic biometry, a partial or complete destruction of the CSP, a decrease of the peripheral spaces, and the presence of a dilated suprapinal recess. And this pattern can be incomplete in case of partial obstructions or onset of obstructions. As illustrated in that case, these patients is referred at 32 weeks due to isolated mild ventriculomegaly. And there is no specific findings which could suggest an obstruction. The cephalic biometry is normal, the pericerebral spaces are still visible, and the septum here is still intact. One may just wonder, what is this cystic structure, which is here and here? And we'll speak about this cystic structure in a short while. An MR was performed and was no more informative, and the follow-up was plain. At 35 weeks, 3 weeks later, the cephalic biometry has increased, as you can see, and the atrial width is now 20 millimeters. It was 11 and 12, now it's 20. And you see there is dilatation of the third ventricle. And if you look at the aqueduct, the lumen of the aqueduct is not visible at all, which suggests an obstruction of the aqueduct. The NEMOR was performed. The lumen of the aqueduct is not visible, and there is some white matter changes with hyperintensity in the white matter here. Because of these changes, we suggest to do a delivery in emergency, and it was done, and the stenosis was confirmed here. And 3 weeks after surgery, you can see that there is some cystic structure in place of the white matter changes. That means that the white matter was under pressure. And this case illustrates an acute hydrocephalus related to a sudden worsening of the CSF obstruction due to aqueduct stenosis revealed in the last weeks of the pregnancy. This is another case of incomplete obstructive pattern. This patient was referred at 24 weeks due to isolated severe ventriculomegaly, and the cephalic biometry was increased. But you can see that here, the lumen of the aqueduct is well identified. And in that case, also, there is this cyst structure here, and it is here. What is cyst structure? In fact, it's a suprapineal recess, which is here. And we publish a patient's dilatation of this suprapineal recess on prenatal imaging is the early clue for obstructive ventriculomegaly downstream of the third ventricle. In that case, if you look at the MR, there is a cyst here just under the vermis, but it's a small one. So it can slow down maybe the CSF, but it was not sufficient to induce obstructive ventriculomegaly. But on the axial plane, you can see here, there is some blood here suggesting intraventricular hemorrhage, which has, in fact, is a combination of the cystic structure and hemorrhage, which led to ventriculomegaly in that case. So don't forget to look for this dilatation of the suprapineal recess as an early clue for an obstructive ventriculomegaly. Second tool, one should perform a complete analysis of the ventricular system, and special attention should be paid to unilateral and asymmetric ventriculomegaly, which lead to investigate a vascular clastic pattern. As illustrated in that case, this patient was referred in the third trimester to for a severe asymmetric ventriculomegaly with an increased cephalic biometry. As you can see here, there is, in fact, asymmetric ventriculomegaly with a thinning of the parenchyma, irregular border of the dilated ventricle, which suggests here a clastic mechanism. But how do you explain the increased cephalic biometry? In that case, in fact, there is combinations of clastic and obstructive mechanism, as demonstrated by the increased cephalic biometry, the partial destruction of the CSP here. Also, you don't see here the peripheral spaces, and there is also here a small suprapineal recess. And this is related to a partial obstruction by the hemorrhage at the level of the distal part of the aqueduct. So when we perform an MR, you see here this ventriculomegaly asymmetry with a thinning of the parenchyma. And you can see on T2 star imaging that there is some hemorrhage here. So this is, in that case, combination of two patterns, clastic and obstructive. In that case, it's also a severe unilateral ventriculomegaly. The cephalic biometry is at 70th percentile, And in that case, you see it's a huge ventriculomegaly, and we did an MR. Here we confirm the unilateral ventriculomegaly, but there is no clue for hemorrhage or clastic mechanism. What is the diagnosis in that case? In fact, here there is the foramen on Monro, and this is in the postnatal period. This is the MR, and it was a congenital obstruction of the left foramen of Monro, which was treated by septostomy. So another cause of unilateral ventriculomegaly. In that case, unilateral ventriculomegaly, disorganization of the midline, and on MR, you can see that there is a huge hemisphere here, and here you can see the cortex, the white matter, and here there is a mix of cortex and, in fact, white matter, and it is hemimegalencephaly, which are other etiologies for asymmetric ventriculomegaly. Now, let's follow the to the posterior fossa, especially when you are facing an obstructive pattern with the early severe ventriculomegaly of the second trimester. In that case, look at the thalami, third ventricle, aqueduct, and cerebellum. And we publish a paper about the pathologies related to anomalies of the differentiation of the diencephalon, mesencephalon, and rhombocephalon. As illustrated in these patients, we refer at 23 weeks of gestation. And in that case, you see that there is no CSP, rupture of the CSP, and there is no periveral spaces. But is it really an obstructive pattern? In fact, if you look at the biometry is just a little bit below what it was expected for the gestational age. But you should keep in mind that in case of very early onset of obstruction, the intraventricular pressure can interfere with the cellular proliferations at the level of the germinal matrix, which leads to slow down, in fact, the cephalic biometry. So in that case, it is, in fact, an obstruction. And if you look carefully, here there is a small TCD, and the aqueduct is not visible. And here, the thalami are fused. And you can see here that thalami are fused, and it was confirmed in the pathological specimen. So it was a combination of developmental pathologies of the diencephalic, mesencephalic with the aqueduct stenosis, and homocephalic differentiation with the hypoplasia of the cerebellum. This is another case we refer at 20 weeks of gestation due to severe ventriculomegaly. As you can see, the two ventricles are dilated, and the third ventricle is dilated also. And if you look here, the proximal part of the aqueduct is well visible, but not well visible in the distal part. But there is also here a rhombocephalosynapsis. So in that case, there is a stenosis of the aqueduct, which was confirmed in the specimen, and also here rhombocephalosynapsis. So it was a combination of a mesencephalic differentiation. Fourth tools, just to illustrate these tools, this patient was referred for isolated mild ventriculomegaly at 23 weeks of gestation. So you have some comment about this image. Look at the Sylvian fissure here. You should know what is the shape of the Sylvian fissure on the axial plane according to the gestational age. And this is the fourth tool. Look carefully at the Sylvian fissure. We published this article with Edwin Coelho, it was a long time ago. At 20 weeks, if you look at the angle between the insula and the temporal lobe. It's wide open at 20 weeks. It's an angle of 45 degrees at 22. It was a square angle at 24. And after, the insula, the posterior part of the insula will be recovered by the temporal lobe, a quarter here at 26, half the way at 28, and at 32 in the middle, as you can see here. And between 26 and 28, you see that there is the superior temporal sulcus, which appear around 27. If you look at these patients and the same patients at 20 weeks, you see the cilium fissure is completely open and abnormal. And we perform an MR, and in that case, you can see that there is a polymicrogyria here, symmetric polymicrogyria, and this pattern was in fact really seen at 23 weeks of gestation if you pay attention at the shape of the cilium fissure. One should also inspect carefully the ventricular wall, the ventricular lumen, and the periventricular area. In these patients refer at 27 weeks to unilateral ventriculomegaly. The ventricle dilated is here, and we did an oblique view here, and this is the midline, and the parasagittal view here. Here, you can see that there is some echogenic foci in the ventricle. And what are these foci? It's like a small clot, and we perform an MR, and with MR, here, there is a small, in fact, intraventricular hemorrhage. So don't forget that it's very important to perform T2 star sequences to diagnose subtle vascular clastic pattern. And this vascular clastic pattern with hemorrhage can be subtle in this case, but it can be, in fact, obvious in such a case. In that case, it's a complete vascular clastic pattern. You see an asymmetry in the ventriculomegaly. You see that there is some echoes in the ventricle, which is some hemorrhage. There is clot in the frontal horn here, and there is resorption of the blood in the ependyma here. So it's lead to a ventricular wall, which is too echogenic. And if the hemorrhage go in the parenchyma, there is parenchymal irregularities related to parenchymal destruction. This patient was referred also to isolated left mild ventriculomegaly. It was here. I did an oblique view here, and if you compare to control here, the ventricular wall is smooth here. Here there is some irregularities, and we did an MR and confirmed there is here some subependymal heterotopia. So look at the wall of the ventricle, look at the lumen, and look also at the periventricular area. This patient was referred at 20 weeks for sonographic follow-up of echogenic small bowel, and all the biological workup was negative, even the PCR for CMV. And here, if you look here, there is some a band of echogenities surrounding the ventricle. You see here a small cyst with some echogenities. And as published by Malinger, this is a very typical findings for CMV. And for this case, it was in fact the first PCR was a false positive of the CMV, and the second one was positive. In that case, borderline ventriculomegaly at 26 weeks. Here, there is some echogenities here, and with some cysts here. This is in fact some huge germinal matrix which are echogenic, and you see here the same echogenity in a case of CMV infection. So this is very important to look at the germinal matrix, and in that case, you see that you see better with ultrasound than with MR because impaired intensity is the same for the germinal matrix and the ventricle. This case at 20 weeks of gestation, microcephaly, and you see also a very abnormal Seidlin fissure, and there is some echogeneity surrounding the ventricle here. This band here is not like the band of the CMV. And if you look at the MR, you understand that this band was just some neurons which did not migrate in the case of lysoencephaly type 1. So look carefully at the ventricular lumen, like here, you see hemorrhage. The ventricular wall, you see some heterotopia, and the periventral space, the ventricular zone here, for here some CMV or some migration anomalies. You should systematically analyze the peripheral spaces and correlated the peripheral spaces to the synesthetic biometry. A case referred at 29 weeks for moderate ventriculomegaly. Here it's not really isolated because the Seidlin fissure is completely abnormal, open. There is some hypercogity surrounding the ventricle. There is some calcification. There is some, the TCD is very reduced. And you can see that the pericerebral spaces here are completely enlarged. And you see this enlargement here. And this is, in fact, very typical of CMV. In that case, a patient was referred for mild ventriculomegaly at 28 weeks, and it was associated with the increased cephalic biometry. You see that the cephalic biometry was a cephalic biometry of 33 weeks of gestation. And you see clearly the peripheral spaces. We did an MR, and the peripheral spaces are clearly visible. They are too much visible than expected. And this, the father has a very huge head circumference, and it was a case of familial benign macrocephaly. So, as an initial important step, one must not forget the context, the medical and the familial history, consanguinity, risk factor, pregnancy-related disorders, familial conditions, and the familial health circumference. So I give you a set of etiologic diagnostic tools to elucidate some isolated ventriculomegaly, and you see that there is tools focusing on anatomical structures. So we should do a complete analysis of the ventricular system, providing analysis of the ventriculomegaly. This ventriculomegaly involves lateral ventricles, third ventricles, the aqueduct, the fourth. You look at the CSF flow, especially at the level of the diencephalon, mesencephalon, and rhombocephalon. You should look at the ventricular lumen, the ventricular wall, and the periventricular area. Look at the gyration. So do a systematic sonographic analysis of the Seidlin fissure, and also look at the peripheral spaces, which are often forgotten. But you have also tools focusing on physiological or physiopathological mechanism. You should investigate the obstructive pattern and also a classic pattern, which can be of vascular or infection origin. Okay? And don't forget the context. So to summarize, you are dealing with isolated ventriculomegaly. Look at the context. Look at the anatomical structures. Use the tools focusing on the physiopathological mechanism. Combine all these tools. And at the end, if you are sure that there is no pathological findings, that the biological workup is still normal, you are dealing with a true isolated ventriculomegaly. And you can find, in fact, all these tools in this article published in 2015. And I think it's a very important issue to really know how to handle this isolated ventriculomegaly, which are in practice always a difficult issue. Thank you for attention.
Hi, Laurent. Good morning. We don't listen to you. Can you open your mic, please?
Is it okay like that?
Yes, it's great.
Thank you.
Thank you
are fine. Hope you are fine and healthy, despite the lockdown in Israel.
Yes, you too. Thank you for a great lecture. I really appreciated also your input on the contribution of MR in brain damage and malformations of cortical development. I think these are great fields of a complementary MR in ventriculomegaly. And we have a couple of questions from the audience.
Okay.
So I'll start with the first question. I understand that you use the 3-grade classification of severity, mild, moderate, and severe, and not the 2-grade system, mild and severe, with a cutoff of 15 millimeters. And can you speak a little about that choice? So do you consider that these 3 grades really changes the prognostication when the ventriculomegaly is really isolated?
For us, at the beginning, we were dividing ventriculomegaly in 2 grades, mild and severe. And in fact, in practice, most of the ventriculomegaly between 10 and 12 are variants of normal. So when it's above 12, and if it's evolutive ventriculomegaly, we are of concern. So in France, when the ventriculomegaly is below 12, most of the time I didn't do any MR if I perform the scan. So for me, it's important, there was a discussion about when, where to put the threshold. Is it 10 or 12? For boy, it was discussed to do for boy 12 because boys are most of the time natrium a little bit slightly above the girls. But at the end, we choose 10, and I think 10 is a good threshold. But for sure, for the parents, when it's between 10 and 12, I say most of the time it's variant of normal. If it's above 12, I think it's I am the thing that I should be of concern, which is it's above 12, and if it's above 12, in all case, I will do an MR. And just to discuss about the term severity, I think we should say minor, moderate, and I don't know, and the term severe is not a good term because for parents, severe means that the prognostic is severe. And it's just biometry, which is more than 15. But in some cases, it's in fact better to have a ventriculomegaly at 18 with the aqueduct obstruction, which can be treated very easily, compared to a ventriculomegaly of 12 in case of severe changes with CMV. So severe in the mind of parents means that the prognosis is severe. And in fact, it's better to say mild, moderate, and very large. You have to find a term. But when I see severe, I always say to the parents, it's a term defining only the importance of the dilatation, and there is no link at all with the prognosis.
Yes, I think it addresses a very important thing on how we communicate the findings
Yes.
to patients and how much stress do we deliver to them. So when we understand what we are looking for, I think we can better address this topic, and this is important. Next question from Professor Moshe Bronstein. He's asking about why do we really need to measure once we can see fluid between the choroid plexus and the medial aspect of the ventricle in cases of ventriculomegaly. So what is the real contribution of biometry?
Sorry, can you repeat? If it's small, if I have to measure or not, it's the question, because when there is no fluid between the plexus and the wall of the ventricle, I will not measure at all. When I have the question in my mind of is there a ventriculomegaly, I will measure. But when there is a small ventricle, I do not measure at all the ventricle. Is it a question? Maybe I missed the question.
I understand that the question is the presence of the fluid between the choroid plexus and the medial wall of the ventricle is already enough for the diagnosis, or you really need the measurement to do that?
I think when you have the feeling that there is a ventriculomegaly, the main issue is the ventriculomegaly stable or evolutive? So in that case, you need a biometry. And the main contribution of measuring with my method is that if you compare the biometry at t time 1 and time 2, that means 2 weeks after, if the operator is not the same, to have a standardization is very important. So I think the measure itself is not very important. Is it mild, moderate, and severe? I think it's enough. But to be sure that the ventriculomegaly is stable or not, you have to measure.
Perfect. Thank you. And the next question, we have 3 more minutes, so we'll take the opportunity. What is, in your opinion, this is a question from Dr. Edward Hod, of the use of 3D in the measurement of the distal and the proximal ventricle for the diagnosis of ventriculomegaly?
First, I do not use 3D, as you know, so I'm not an expert to answer such question. The main issue is how to measure the proximal ventricle, because when you want to measure the proximal ventricle, most of the time it's very difficult because you have the artifact of the vault. And in that case, I try to do a slightly oblique view, but when I do that, I know that I will increase a little bit the size of the ventricle. So when I do this slightly oblique view using 2D, because I don't do 3D, and I see when I do that, and when I see that the ventricle is at 10 or 11, I know that I am increasing the size of ventricle. And if it's 10 or 11, I know there is no ventriculomegaly at all. When I have a concern about unilateral ventriculomegaly involving the proximal ventricle, most of the time I will do an MR.
Okay. And this is another question from Ori Shen. In severe ventriculomegaly, when a flattened pattern of sulci is observed, especially the Sylvian fissure, how do you distinguish between cortical malformation and an abnormal appearance of the SF due to increased pressure related to the ventriculomegaly? I think the question really addresses the abnormal changes from MCDs and from the pericerebral spaces.
Yes, it's sometimes very difficult when the obstruction is very severe, and in that case, there is deformation of the Sylvian fissure. In such a case, we should know that what we see using ultrasound is just the surface of the parenchyma. It's not the cortex. To have a good view of the cortex, to know what is if the cortex is thickened or a normal cortex, to have a good identification of the cortex itself,
for sure, I will do an MR. So if there is some concern about cortical disorders, for sure, MR may answer the question, because ultrasound, this is very important when you teach to tell what you see with ultrasound is only the surface. The surface can be abnormal and it can be ondulated when there is polymicrogyria. But if you want to have a good analysis of the cortex, and if you are of concern about some cortical disorders, an MR is mandatory.
And our last question, we have half minute. And I think the message of this question is very important. From Avidya Nejad. So if ventriculomegaly presents with normal head circumference, can you rule out an obstructive cause?
In fact, first of all, when the ventriculomegaly increases, the CSF flow surrounding the encephal will reduce, and after the biometry will increase. So for sure, if I'm concerned about obstructive ventriculomegaly, I will look at the CSP. I will look at the suprapennal recess, and I will do a follow-up 2 weeks after to see if the biometry is still normal or if it's increased in size. So, and as I told you, when the ventriculomegaly is very early, the pressure of the ventricle on the germinal matrix will slow down the processes of proliferation. So in very early ventriculomegaly, the biometry can be normal or can be under the norm because of the decrease and abnormal proliferation.
Thank you. I think this is a very important message indeed, because many times we have an obstructive process in early pregnancy and head circumference is still
yes. And in CARRE2, with a very huge ventriculomegaly, most of the time you have a small cephalic biometry because it's very early, and in that case, even if it's obstructive, the head circumference is reduced because there is, in fact, some consequences on the proliferation itself.
Thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you, Karina.
Keep
nice
safe,
to see you.
Keep healthy, and we really enjoyed the talk. Thank you.
Thank you for you.